What's up, my box truck bosses? It's the business doctor, and welcome back to another episode of Box Truck Bank, where we discuss all things box truck. In today's episode, I'm going to be discussing 10 tips for buying a box truck. If you've been following the box truck market, you know the box truck prices are decreasing. I've seen box trucks as low as $10,000. And if you've been following the market, you know 5 to 6 months ago, that was not the case. Box truck prices were inflated in the $80,000 to $90,000 price range. So whether you're looking to grow your fleet or to upgrade your box truck, if you're going to be a box truck boss, it's important that you know what things to look for when buying a box truck. So with these 10 tips that I give today, they're not all inclusive and they're not in a specific order, but these are probably some foundational things you want to consider when buying a box truck. Don't focus on the make of the box truck. You want to focus on these elements. The make kind of comes down, for the most part, to preference. Some may make some arguments that it does relate to quality, and that may be true. But for the most part, don't focus on the make, but focus on these tips that I give you today, which will help you determine what's the best box truck for you. Now, I'm going to try to keep these tips as broad as possible, because at the end of the day, it comes down to what type of work you're going to be doing, what you're going to be hauling. So what type of box truck I would recommend for one box truck boss may be different for another box truck boss. So don't focus on the make, focus on the model and the engine and these other parts that I'm going to share with you today. So first thing you want to focus on is the mileage of the box truck. The mileage of the box truck gives you an idea of how much the box truck is being used. Ideally, I try not to buy box trucks over 150,000 miles. Now, there's always an exception to the rule. So there's people who bought box trucks with 90,000 miles and had issues the next day. But my rule of thumb is always check the mileage, because this gives you an idea. When you're looking into the mileage, you want to find out, was this used, rented out to personal individuals? Was this a company box truck? Was it over the road? Because it really gives you an idea of how much it was used, how many owners have owned it prior to me, because that lets you know if owners are selling it every few months, that may be an indicator that there is maybe another issue that you haven't identified. So I always check the mileage, and my rule of thumb is 150,000 miles or less. Second, you want to look at the engine. Depending on what type of work you want to do will kind of determine what type of engine. So whether that's a Cummins engine, an International engine, Ford engine, Hino, a Zuzu engine, you want to look at what type of engine. So you're looking at horsepower, you're looking at torque. This is important if you're going to be doing over the road versus being local. I know with my box trucks, when they're over the road, especially in California, depending on where they're going, there's a lot of hills that they have to go through. And if we're carrying a load that's 6, 7, 8,000, or some of our trucks do 9,000 pounds, I want to make sure that engine is strong, because that engine is going to have to go through those hills. It's going to be a lot of work on the engine. And that's also something to consider as you're negotiating your rates. The heavier the load, the more work that is putting on your truck, especially if there's a lot of hills and valleys that the truck has to go through. So look at the engine. Ideally, when you look at the box trucks with the Ford engines or the Zuzu engines, a lot of times those box trucks are more for the lighter duty box trucks. Thirdly, you want to look at the transmission. And this kind of goes in tandem with the engine. The transmission is important. I've had different type of engines and transmission, and this isn't paid, but a good combination has been for me in my experience is the Cummins engine and the Allison transmission. But that may not work for you, and I know some people who have had issues with those. So everyone kind of has a different experience, so don't take what I say as law, but these are good principles as you approach looking at a box truck. So the same thing with the transmission. when you get those Isuzu or even the Ford box trucks, a lot of times those box trucks are more lighter duty when you look at the specs of the engines and the transmission. So these transmissions are a better fit for box truck bosses who are going to be maybe doing local or doing furniture deliveries or very light loads. Not all the time, but a lot of times these engines are more suited for those versus the Hino and the Cummins and the International are made for more heavy duty and heavy hauling, delivering pallets and loads of that nature. Fourthly, you want to look at the B10 and B50 engine life. You may have to contact the manufacturer, do some research online. But what I also tell you to do is talk to those who have owned trucks like you. I mean, some people may have different experiences, but at least you'll have some idea of things that can happen with the engine. So you're probably wondering, what is B10 and B50 engine life? So B10 refers to at what point in my engine's life will I have to replace 10% of the parts. So is that at 100,000 miles, 200,000 miles, however it's broken down. B50 engine life refers to at what point in the engine's life will I have to replace 50% of the parts. Do I need to get new pistons, new cylinders? At what point am I going to ideally need a rebuild? Now, there are some people who go past that mileage. There are some who are come before the need repairs before. But this gives you an idea of, okay, if I'm close to my B50 engine life, I know that I need to have some money saved because likely I'm going to need to replace 50% of the engine. And this gives you an idea to plan out the life cycle of your engine and your truck, and you can plan accordingly. And this is why the lower the mileage, ideally is better because it gives you more engine life. Tip number 5, check for blow-by. So when you're checking for blow-by, this happens when combustion gases leak and get outside of the piston and leak into the cylinder and get to the crankcase. And this causes those gases to escape. So it can result from a multitude of issues. So you may be saying, well, I don't know what blow-by is. I haven't seen it. So there's a few different ways you can check for it. You know, if it's not shifting correctly, if there's a lot of smoke coming when you start up your box truck. But also you can look at in your oil fill cap with the box truck running, you want to see if there is white fumes or gases coming from there. Now, it's to some extent it's normal to have some blow-by, but if you can see a lot of white fumes and gases coming from that, then you know that there may be an issue. And blow-by can affect your engine's power. And there's a lot of different issues that can happen because of blow-by. So start up the box truck, take off the oil fill cap, the truck is running, and see if there are white fumes coming from the truck. This is important because it can indicate other areas that you need to look at. So after you check the blow-by, you want to check for any leaks. So coolant leaks, oil leaks, transmission leaks, and get up under the truck, let it run, and make sure that you don't see anything leaking from the truck. This is important because you don't want to buy. I've heard horror stories of people buying trucks and they get an hour down the road and the truck is leaking. And this may be because they didn't do a thorough inspection of the truck. They drove it around the block and they didn't have any issues. Number 7, you want to look at the physical condition of the actual box. Look for any leaks. Look for any gaps. And this kind of can also, in some instances, tell you how well the box truck was taken care of. So I like to get in the actual box, check the lift gate if it comes up and down, which I believe a lift gate is absolutely necessary. But make sure it has a lift gate. Get in the box truck and look for openings in there. So you're going to look for daylight coming in the box, which is a sign there's a gap, which could be problematic because if you get a load and it rains and it gets on the load, that could damage the load and cause a lot of issues when you get to that drop-off. So check for gaps, check if there's anything dented, are there screws sticking out, is there anything that's been rigged. A lot of people will rig the box truck because that'll tell you or indicate whether there may be some issues with that box. And sellers aren't always going to be honest with you, but if you have a question about something, just ask them. It doesn't hurt. Have you had any work done to the box? Are there any known issues? Like I said, I wouldn't take it as law, but I would still ask. Tip number 8, don't buy a box truck smaller than 24 feet. Don't buy a box truck smaller than 24 feet. And I say this because as we've seen in the box truck industry, it's very volatile. Things can change within 24 hours. And as a box truck boss, you have to be able to navigate and adapt to those changes in the business place. So let's say you are a local box truck boss and you lose your contract. So for a couple weeks or a couple months, you may have to go over the road. You don't want to limit yourself if you only have a 16-foot box truck. It doesn't mean that'll be a permanent solution, but getting a 24-foot box truck really gives you more options. Or what I recommend to my students who want to stay local, that's fine, you can stay local, but you can also still do regional. If you don't have a contract, you can travel from where I'm at. I can get to surrounding states within 3 or 4 hours and make it back the same night. And having that 24-foot box truck really helps. The minimum requirement I would say is 24, but I recommend 26. And you may say, well, with the contract I'm getting or with the loads I'm getting locally, I don't need that. And that may be fine if that's your only option. You may want to consider that. But if something happens and you need to shift and you have to maintain, you have to pay for insurance, you have to keep your drivers, you may have to shift temporarily, and that 24-foot box allows you to do that. And that's why I recommended having a lift gate because you'll lose out on a fair number of loads if you don't have that lift gate. So number 9, once you find a truck that you like, the engine works, the transmission works, you've seen the pictures online or maybe you went in person, you want to search for parts for that vehicle. So you may, depend on if you're buying, an international model box truck or something here in the States, will really help you determine whether you're going to be able to get parts and how accessible the parts are. Generally, the international makers, they're more difficult to get, and there are only certain mechanics and shops that will work on them. So if you only have one box truck and you're waiting 2 months for a part, and yes, I have waited 2+ months for a part, and what happened with this particular mechanic shop, they ordered the wrong part, so then I had to wait even longer. So check how much is a belt for this shop. Call around to your international, call around the high-note dealers, call around to the dealership and ask them, do you have this part in stock? So belts, water pumps, pistons, all different types of parts. Now some parts are like pistons, you get into more of the engine and rebuilds, but even just checking for basic parts. And what I recommend is that buy those parts. So a belt, $20, $30, go ahead and buy the belt and keep that in your truck, because that'll prevent you from having to wait for it to come in. I actually had a truck break down, and it would have really helped me if I had the belt already in the truck, because the mechanic could have came straight out on site to where my driver was and replaced the belt right there. Instead, the mechanic had to go find the part, call around, and they're paid by the hour, so it's costing me more and more money the longer he spends waiting on it. So find those basic sensors for your engine. So just Google basic parts for the engine, call the dealer, see if they have them in stock. If not, see how soon they'll be able to get those parts and the prices. And that'll let you know, do I want something that I'm not going to be able to work on, or something that's going to be difficult to find someone to work on, especially if you're over the road. So number 10, after you get your box truck, and go ahead and let it run for at least 30 minutes. You may have to haggle or give them some gas money, depending on if you're doing a private seller. But let it run for 30 minutes, because I had a coolant leak in one of my box trucks, but the coolant leak the leak didn't start leaking until 30 minutes after being driven. Because we stayed there, I stayed with the mechanic for about 15 minutes and let it run and no issues. So you may have to haggle with them, but at least let it run for 30 minutes. Check up under there for any leaks, and you'll feel a lot more assured and confident that the truck is in good running shape. With the box trucks, I recommend diesel. It's just the engines last longer. It work better, and especially with diesel prices going down, they're just a better, I believe, for the box truck industry, and it gives you more options. Some of the gas ones will work, but you never know in this box truck game if you're going to have to shift at the drop of a dime, and having a stronger engine will definitely help with that. When you have a mechanic come out and take a look at the truck, you want to make sure that the mechanic puts the truck on a scanner. So he scans the truck's computer to see if there's any codes. After you've hopefully checked, you should have checked by then to make sure there aren't any lights or codes on the dash of the truck. But even if there isn't, make sure that mechanic plugs it up to the scanner and reads the computer to see if there's any active codes. This will let you know whether or not there's any current issues that the computer is putting out. But secondly, the scanner should be able to look at inactive codes and past codes. So this will be an indicator of past issues that the truck has had that they resolved, even if they're not active. That'll give you an idea of maybe work that they've had done on it in the past. Find the truck and you've completed these 10 steps. Go ahead and find your local mechanic and have him to do a inspection. Some do like a 72 point, 82 point, something like that, inspection on the truck. They'll come in and they'll look for something. You want to tell that mechanic, I'm looking for something wrong with this truck. I want you to find it. Because you want to make sure that mechanic doesn't just walk through, and ideally you want to be there. I once bought a truck out of state and I couldn't be there. So I just called someone local and asked them to go take a look at it. And they said they took a look at it, but when I flew out to go pick up the truck wouldn't even start. So I knew that he didn't do a thorough inspection. So you really want to harp to that mechanic. It's going to cost you maybe a few $100s, but it's worth it when you're making a big investment that you want to last you a long time. So ask that mechanic, tell him you want him to find something wrong with the truck. Obviously don't make something up, but you want him to be thorough, front to back, top and bottom. If he or she is done in 15 minutes, they didn't do a good inspection. So when you're looking at the truck, you want to just look at the general appearance of the truck. This tells you how well it was taken care of. For instance, you can look at the air filter. Air filter should be replaced at minimum every time the oil is being changed. So if that air filter is dirty, it's a good indicator that that truck wasn't well taken care of, because they would have been getting it changed out every time they got the oil changed. So look, is the truck clean? Is there dried up oil spills and coolant all over the inside of the engine? So I wouldn't take this as a sole decision maker, but I will use this to help me determine whether or not whoever drove it, whether that was a owner, operator, or a driver, whether they took good care of it. Are the seats all tore up? Now, with that being said, my first truck, it was actually from Frito-Lay, and it was just horribly taken. It was dirty, chip bags everywhere, but it was a good truck. So there are some exceptions to it, but a clean truck can sometimes be an indicator that it was well taken care of. But sometimes they just cleaned it up before actually selling it to you. So I hope that when you go out, whether you're trying to grow your fleet or whether you're trying to upgrade your box truck, that you use these 10 steps or tips to help guide you in your decision making. So box truck bosses, I wish you all the best as you're trucking, whether over the road or local. If you'd like to have some consulting or you need assistance, please contact me at boxtruckbank@gmail.com so that we can schedule a coaching session. So until the next time, my box trucks bosses, I'm out. Peace.